meat, egg, and dairy industries are literally killing the planet
Just another reason why you should go vegan right now.
right now.
According to Cowspiracy, which is a documentary on Netflix that you should go and watch,
Animal agriculture is responsible for a staggering amount of global destruction.
climate change.
The entire transportation sector, we're talking cars, buses, trains, boats, airplanes, all of it accounts for 13% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Animal agriculture, 51%.
You can reduce your carbon footprint by 50% just by going vegan.
Water use. Taking shorter showers is great and everything, but every time you eat a beef hamburger, that's 660 gallons of water. That's 2 months of showers.
To put it in other terms, about 5% of US water use is domestic, so like washing your clothes and your dishes, gardening, all that stuff. Animal agriculture accounts for 55% of US water use. Deforestation.
1 to 2 acres of rainforests are cleared every second. That is a huge problem. And animal agriculture accounts for 91% of Amazon destruction.
And 110 animal and insect species are lost every single day because of rainforest destruction. So that was a lot of facts. But the bottom line, the best thing you can do for the planet is just to go vegan.
Go to PETA.org/vegan to take the pledge and learn how easy it is to make the compassionate switch.
And use the hashtag 30daysofvegan to join the conversation. We'll be back tomorrow with another vegan video. In the meantime, go watch Cowspiracy. Just go. Go do it.
Welcome to Veganism, the Compassionate Choice. My name is Keith Baker. I'm here as always with George Ortega. And today we're going to be discussing veganism, climate, and the environment. Now, what the viewers just saw, George, as we introed the show, was a video produced by PETA talking about the correlation between veganism and climate change. Now, before we go further, those videos came courtesy to us thanks to Casey Kern, who's a senior action team coordinator for PETA, and he's been a big help to us getting these access to these videos, getting us access to information that we're using on our show. So thank you, Casey, for those videos, and thank you, PETA, for producing those videos. George, so what did you think of the clips?
I thought it's great. I mean, you know, they just cited very important facts, especially that, you know, 51% of climate change is caused by greenhouse gases. That's, most people have no idea. And the politicians, like this Paris conference recently and all, that they don't go into this because it's not something that people want to hear. But, you know, if it's over half of climate change is as a result of the livestock industry, that's so important.
Yeah, and we should make note that that figure, 51%, comes from the World Bank. We should make note of that. That's where it comes from. Now, where to start today? I mean, we got a full show full of facts to give. So why don't we start with the vegan diet? That it produces 50% less carbon dioxide, 1/11th the amount of oil, 1/13th the amount of water, and 1/18th the amount of land use compared to that of a carnivore diet. Now each day, a person who eats a vegan diet can save 1,100 gallons of water, 45 pounds of grain, 30 square feet of forested lands, 20 pounds of CO2 equivalent, and 1 animal's life. Now that's just a huge, you know, that's a lot that one person can save daily just by switching to a vegan diet.
Yeah, and it's important. I mean, it's like in so much of the world, you know, water is a scarce resource, and land is becoming scarce. We're getting rid of the forest and all. We're going to go into this in more detail, but, you know, if we're using like 11 times more oil, 13 times more water and all for this meat, I mean, like, we need to conserve our resources. It's hugely important.
Yeah, and if people have been watching our show so far, you can remember actually in both the first 3 episodes, we've mentioned each time, if you're not going to switch switch to veganism to save the animal, maybe you don't care about the animals. We've introduced health. We've talked about the impacts on your health. So if you're not going to do it for that, now just do it for the environment, the world you live in. Because all these facts that we have, like for example, in water use, now by the year 2030, nearly half of everyone in the world will be living in countries highly stressed for water, according to UN projections. Now, the world has 7 billion people in it. You do the math, that's, you know, an enormous amount of people that this will affect.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, like a lot of, the episodes we've done so far have been on how becoming a vegan is the healthy alternative in terms of individuals, what we eat, to maintain our health. And certainly it's a way of preventing this horrible cruelty toward animals today, right? But this, this show is to a great extent about the future. Right now, we're consuming so many resources because of this livestock industry, that animals, it's going to affect future generations. So this is like, it's an extremely important show because of that.
Yes, also just another fact I wanted to give, that animal agriculture is responsible for 20 to 33%, depending on where you get your facts from, of all freshwater consumption in the world today. Now, I mean, most people think about it, a lot of people use water just for showers and washing dishes or washing their cars. A lot of people say take quicker showers, take shorter showers, but as we saw in the video, 1 pound of hamburger meat for a hamburger is equivalent to about 2 months worth of showers. So, what's the easier choice to cut out that water consumption?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I think in the video it showed that, like, over half of our water use is devoted to livestock, whereas like just what, 5% is to showers
5%,
and
yeah,
all that.
for
So
private homes. So that's just,
and people don't realize this. I know.
Yeah. Now let's give an example of, well, what I just said about producing 1 pound of beef. It's about 2,500 gallons of water for 1 pound of beef. I mean, think about me and you, to drink 1 gallon of water. I know a lot of people try to drink a gallon of water a day. I mean, how hard that is. Could you imagine just wasting, 2,500 gallons of water just so you can kill 1 cow to have 1 hamburger? Now, if you go to a barbecue, people have like 2 or 3. Or so if you have 2 people, if me and you each have 2 hamburgers each, that's 10,000 gallons of water that we just used.
Yeah.
Which, you put in those figures, it's
And it's
insane.
like, with eggs, a pound of eggs, 477 gallons of water. 900 gallons of water for each pound of cheese. I mean, it's extremely inefficient,
Yeah, and now even so, even for 1 gallon of milk, that's 1,000 gallons of water. Now you might think, okay, milk doesn't just come from a cow, but the amount of water you use to, feed the cow and in the plants used to process all of this, you're using on average 1,000 gallons of water just for 1 gallon of milk, which, as we've discussed in the past, cow's milk can cause other issues, health issues, cancer is one of them, so.
And this water use issue, I mean, California just experienced, I think, a 4-year drought, fortunately they're coming out of it, but it, to a great extent, this is the world is going to be like suffering from a vast water shortage in the future, and that's going to lead to like geopolitical instability. You're going to have countries fighting over the scarce water resources. So this is an issue of national security. It extends far beyond the climate change issue.
Yep, like I said too earlier, by the year 2030, based on UN projections, how scarce water will be. Whenever resources have been scarce in the past, what does that lead to? It leads to a lot of fighting, a lot of wars, a lot of killings, just because people want to fight for those resources. We can avoid that just simply by, going vegan now, and will help, not get to that point. If we could go back to the greenhouse gases for a second. Now the World Bank figure said that the animal agriculture is responsible for 51% of greenhouse gases. Now, again, most people think the amount of pollution from factories and cars on the roads will cause more of that. Now, the same World Bank believes that transportation and cars, the amount of exhaust from them is responsible for just 13% of greenhouse gases. So it's 51% from animals, 13% from transportation. So again, if you're trying to really save the environment, which is the easier choice.
Yeah, and you know, the reason, you know, what we're saying is important is you're not hearing this from the politicians. You're not hearing this even, you know, from the advocates, from the climate change advocates. You know, people don't want to talk about this because a lot of climate change advocates are not vegans. So, you know, this is a major shift we have to do.
Yeah, I mean, they're not vegans themselves. It doesn't affect them personally. There's a lot of money in this business too. So, I mean, I don't pretend to be, you know, in the know of how much money is going to politicians, but you know, it's a large amount because the industry, if the dairy industry goes down, the meat industry, that's a huge part of the economy that will be affected. But then again, there's other ways to, I mean, once, say if you got rid of the meat industry, people still need to eat, so there'll be money being made by politicians, but why they just don't want to do it, I don't know.
Yeah, and we have to do an episode on this. Just the money in politics is a major part of the problem because, like, yeah, right now the agriculture, the food industry, you know, just has so much influence on the politicians, just not allowing them to address this.
Yeah, let's move on from that. Then let's move on to land use. Now, animal agriculture is the leading cause of species extinction, ocean dead zones, water pollution, and habitat destruction. Livestock covers 45% of the Earth's total land, and worldwide, at least 50% of grain is fed to livestock. Now, you see all the time in commercials on TV, you know, starving children from around the world, donate money, let's feed them, which is great. I think everyone should, you know, donate what little they have or whatever they can to help feed these people, but we can, you know, feed everyone who's starving a lot, you know, a lot more. Like we said, for a person with a vegan diet for one day will save 45 pounds of grain. Now, if you take that 45 pounds of grain, how many people that are starving can you feed?
Exactly,
you can feed a lot more.
And it takes, I think, for example, like maybe 8 to 10 pounds of grain to create a pound of beef. You know, it's an extreme waste of resource.
It really is. Now, if we exclude Alaska, so just take Alaska out of the United States, nearly half of the United States is devoted to animal agriculture. And 2 to 5 acres of land are used per cow, and 1.5 acres can produce 37,000 pounds of plant-based food. Now, I'm going to read that again. 2 to 5 acres of land are used per 1 cow. 1.5 acres, which is less than the 2 to 5 acres I just said, can produce 37,000 pounds of plant-based food. Now, again, we're talking about people who are starving, people who don't have enough. This is one way to ensure everyone has enough, but again, for some reason, it's just not being taken seriously.
Yeah, and do the comparison. I mean, like, you know, 1.5 acres of produce can create, you know, 37,000 pounds of plant-based food, whereas like that same 1.5 acres can only produce 375 pounds of beef. I mean, that's the thing, you know, we're just like wasting this, you know.
Yeah, that's really, do the math, that's 100 times difference. I mean, that's, you know, like I'm going to say it's ridiculous. Yeah, that we're not using the land to provide more food for more people, healthier food for people. Now, 1/3 of the planet is desertified, with livestock as the leading driver, and the livelihoods of nearly 1 billion people in some 100 countries are threatened by desertification.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, as this fertile land, you know, from overuse, from taking the you know, sometimes the trees away and all, they become deserts, and you can't grow anything on deserts, and so, like, you know, that's another major problem. Yeah.
Now, another topic we wanted to discuss today was the topic of waste. Now, for example, a farm with 2,500 dairy cows will produce the same amount of waste as a city of 411,000 people. I mean, so 2,500 cows are like on one area of land where people think it's just centralized to there, but the amount of waste they're causing, a city of 411,000 people. I mean, we're living here in White Plains, New York, with a population of around, you know, I think between 60 and 70,000 people who live here, and for numbers up to 250,000 during the day with people coming in. and we could walk up and down the street and I could see waste, you know, everywhere on the sidewalks and depending on where we go. So just imagine almost, you know, kind of double that, and the amount of waste that's created there is just, you know, one dairy farm.
Yeah, and this is waste. This is in addition to the greenhouse gases that these cows produce. You know, the methane, the carbon dioxide. And so, like, you know, a lot of this waste, you know, they don't know how to put it. A lot of times it goes into the water system, it pollutes the rivers, it goes into the ocean, pollutes the ocean, yeah.
Yep, so just another way, you know, we're killing ourselves, killing our planet without most of us knowing that, because we're not seeing the effects right away. We're seeing it gradually. Like you said, if the stuff goes into the waterways and the oceans, how are we seeing that? It only comes up with, okay, over time the climate's changing. Why the climate change? Well, we've been doing this all along, but it just seems to be going in circles and circles, and you know, that's why we're here today, to try to educate as many people as we can with as many facts as we can. Now, speaking of waterways, biggest waterways on the planet, the oceans. Now, there's the potential to see fishless oceans by the year 2048, and we know how vast the oceans are. That's, what is that? I think it's about 70% of the planet is covered in oceans and water. Now, to see that being empty of fish by 2048, which is, you know, not only about 30 years from now, that's, you know, crazy.
Yeah, yeah. And in addition to that, I mean, like, there's a lot of needless, you know, they don't fish using, you know, lines and hooks anymore. It's with nets. So what happens is, like, you know, when they catch a pound of fish for the market that we consume, they're catching as much as maybe 5 pounds of other animals, you know.
Yeah, you see that, you know, dolphins will come up in there, crabs, other sorts of fish that they're not going for, swordfish, and when they're on the deck, they die, but what happens to them? They're just tossed back in as just waste. And what also comes up with the oceans, with the fish that are being, you know, taken out of the oceans, is the waste that's in the oceans. So now, when you're pulling these fish on, I mean, I've seen videos, you put the fish on the boat, there's a whole bunch of waste that's on them too, so, and they're going to be sitting in that on the boat until they get back to market and sold, hopefully clean, but and you could also understand why people are getting sicker and sicker from eating fish and other seafood.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Now, another thing about the oceans, scientists do estimate that as many as 650,000 whales, dolphins, and seals are killed each year by fishing vessels. So now, whether that's them being on the boat or just, you know, the fishing vessels in the waterway maybe hitting some of them, you know, either way, all these animals are just being killed.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's, again, like this, we're doing to the fish, the animals in the sea, the same thing we're doing to the animals on land. I mean, just, you know, the way they catch them, you know, ordinarily when a fish eats another fish, it's pretty much over, it's quick.
Yeah.
But, like, you know, they spend like minutes, hours in these nets, you know, before they die, so it's not a...
Yeah, and they're suffocating too. I mean, me and you, we could sit here and try holding our breath for, you know, as long as we can. We're getting through a minute, we're, you know, faces turning purple, you know, we're stomping around because, you know, we can't handle it for that long. But we can control that we're breathing. Because we have our oxygen in this room. When the fish are taken out of the water, they can't breathe, and there's nothing they can do about that. In the time we have remaining, would you like to discuss the rainforest issue?
Yeah, well, the rainforests are important because we get so many of our medicines from the rainforest. Okay, so you know, because of this animal agriculture, the livestock industry, you know, up to 91% of the destruction of the Amazon rainforest is due to this, and you know, this, I mean, like, we've lost a lot of rainforest already, and you know, we lose at, what is it, 1 to 2 acres every second, you know, and again, this is really, it's not just the medicines, you know. For example, the plants, animals, and insects are going extinct, you know, at the rate of like about 137 a day, according to the Cowspiracy documentary. So again, but I think the most important part of the rainforest, you know, loss has to do with the medicines. It's really where we get so many of the medicines we have today.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to touch on a number too. Since I asked you to start speaking about the rainforest, that took about a minute. So in that time, we just lost about 60 to 120 acres of rainforest, while George was just saying what he just had to say about the rainforest. So just think about it in that sense, and not to mention the amount of animal species and plant species that we're losing. The Amazon rainforest, we know that'll affect the amount of oxygen and CO2 emissions on the planet too, but yet again, it's still being done. And I mean, the Amazon rainforest, I remember hearing about that as a topic, since I was, single digits in age, 7, 8, 9 years old, 33 now. So, I mean, it's still going on, and yet, nothing seems to be done. You'll hear politicians say all the time, we have to do something, but then their actions will be totally different. So, if they're not going to do it, it's up to us, the average person, to, try to fix this problem. And we can do that simply, as we presented, just by, going vegan. We'll save on the amount of water being used on the planet. We'll just, help the animals. We're going to help ourselves. We're not going to contribute to as much land destruction. The amount of, water and grain and everything else we're saving, we hope that can, be used somewhere else.
Right, but Keith, I want to put things in perspective. We've been talking about the rainforest, the oceans, water, land use, waste and all, but all of that pales into comparison to with what this livestock industry is doing with climate change. I mean, climate change has the potential, meters of rise in sea levels, and like 95% of the world's population is along the shores of the different continents. The droughts, the floods, the increased hurricanes, the increased temperature. I mean, that's where the real harm of this, again, if over half of climate change is being caused by the livestock industry, that says everything,
Yep, and that's something, that, can be fixed. I mean, I've been reading stuff recently too where I know there's one in the UK and there was another one in the US. One was a dairy farm and one was a farm for livestock. And the owners now have decided to change those to, I'm going to call them vegan farms, where they'll have more produce come out of that too. And they know they're probably just taking a risk too, and they're going to take maybe a hit financially initially because they had a lot of people, coming and buying from them. But ethically, they couldn't do it anymore. So definitely glad to hear about that, and we look forward to hearing about that even more. Now, actually, briefly before we close today, I'd just like to say this Saturday, so it would have passed by the time the show airs, is the International Animal Rights March. There's one in New York City. I know there's one in Los Angeles. There's a few cities around the U.S. that are having it. I'll be going down there, and I'm going to be taking some footage of it and come back. So in a future episode, you'll be able to see, interviews with people who are at the march and what they think either about animal rights or veganism. You'll see some footage of the march. I look forward to that in a future episode.
Yeah, and again, I hope, hopefully I'll be able to get down there also. And, again, what I hope will happen is that, we'll have a lot of signs about, how it's, hurting animals and it's hurting our health and all. But to the extent that, the focus is also on this climate change, then, this is something the climate change activists really need to know a lot more about. So hopefully a lot of that demonstration will focus on the effects of climate change. So really, not just the activists, the public, what the public doesn't understand, it doesn't know is going on, they can't begin to address. So that's why this march is so important.
Yeah, it's very important. So, I mean, we would like to, like I've said before, we'd like to change everyone's mind, but we're not going to overnight. So we just hope that enough people will see this, as we're, walking up and down the streets of New York City or whatever city the march is in. Maybe one person might be interested, they might ask questions, and people will be there to answer, and you just hope to build this, just slowly over time, and slowly build the vegan movement. And now, actually before we go, we do have one more video to show the viewers, but before I introduce the video, is there anything else you would like to say concerning this topic?
Well, just quickly, just that something else that'll help people to just get around going vegan is that, you know, they're making a lot of progress in vitro meats that, I mean, like, to the extent that they make the meat in a lab, it's not consuming as much resources and all, it's not consuming as much greenhouse gases, so people wouldn't necessarily have to go completely vegan to help, you know, if that helps.
No, yeah, so, yeah, again, not everyone's going to change that too. Even like vegetarians, they want to give up dairy, but now you have other alternatives too and save the planet as well. Now, the last video that we're going to show as we close out is another video courtesy of PETA, and thank you again, Casey Kern from PETA, for giving us access to these videos. Now, there's an actress, Maggie Q. She's been on shows such as Nikita, which was on, you know, from like 2010 to 2013. She was in the movie Live Free or Die Hard with Bruce Willis. She's in a current show with Kiefer Sutherland called Designated Survivor. She's been vegan activist for a long time, and there's a video that she talks about helping climate change by having a change in her diet. So we would like to show that to you, and we hope you enjoy, and we hope you come back for another episode of Veganism, the Compassionate Choice. Again, the website, the email you've seen throughout the show. Please feel free to give comments, feedbacks, questions to myself or George, and we will see you next time.
Animal and environmental issue is obviously, you know, one of my biggest things, but the minute PETA calls, I'm always, you know, excited because, you know, there's a lot of power behind PETA, there's a lot of passion behind PETA. And PETA's a group that does things that other groups don't want to do. For me, there's a lot of admiration in that. The concept, when I was talking to the photographer, we wanted it to be something, I didn't want to make a dark ad, but I did want to shoot an ad that was more serious, I think. There's really nothing tied to this issue that isn't sort of dark and needs to be sort of fixed in a big way. There's so many issues tied to the meat industry. Social, environmental, humanitarian, all of them. And I know that when I'm eating, that I'm not hurting the planet, I'm not hurting other people on this planet, I'm not hurting animals, you know, and I'm not hurting nature. I first saw the world across me. It was an interesting metaphor for the way that I feel all the time. When we do feel the weight of the world, and truly the weight of the world depends on us, you know, it depends on our choices, and I wish that people would pick up a book or watch a documentary and understand that their choices can really make a difference.